What is going on, everybody? My name is Grant Mitchell here on the Sports 2.0 show, and I'm joined by my wonderful co-hosts, Alec Busse and Vincent Graziano. First things first, make sure you subscribe to the Sports 2.0 network to stay up to date with the latest content and videos moving forward. Now, Alec, we have a bit of a history here. You took me down on the first Sports 2.0 takes of this season. Alec, how are you doing today?
Doing pretty well. I won't embarrass you today with any should college athletes be paid conversation. Doing really well, though, trying to work ahead on the week before I go on vacation later in the week and then through the next week. So I'm pretty excited about that.
I appreciate that. Where are you headed to on vacation?
Going on a family vacation to the U.S. Virgin Islands. We're going to St. John's. Pretty relaxing place from what I hear. Quiet, island life. I'll enjoy it, I'm sure.
Vincent, you got anything that can live up to that going on in the coming weeks?
Not a whole lot. I mean, I'm going to be sitting around watching the U.S. Open starting Thursday. I'm excited for that. Torrey Pines. I've played the course. It's a great place, so it should be fun to watch.
Well, that's great. Hey, he's going to be glued to the screen, so make sure you stay in touch with the 2.0 network, like I already mentioned, for the latest updates. And today, we are going to be talking football. Now, it's been pretty quiet in the news for the past couple of weeks, but we are here to give you an AFC preview. Obviously, we already did the NFC preview with the panel earlier today. We're starting in the AFC with the AFC South. Alec, why don't you go ahead and give me your thoughts on this division? Obviously, the Jaguars leading the rebrand of the division. What do you think is going to happen this season?
Well, I think it's a pretty interesting division to kind of follow on the surface. Obviously, there's been some turnover there with Carson Wentz being traded to the Colts this offseason and reuniting with Frank Wright as the Colts head coach. So that'll be an interesting storyline to kind of keep track of. If he's able to return to his form of, 2017, 2018, and of course 2019 a little bit there, and he's able to stay healthy, I think you have to kind of like the Colts' opportunity to potentially win this division, despite the Titans recently trading for Julio Jones and adding to their offensive weapons with obviously A.J. Brown and Derrick Henry. And then the Titans' defense, I think, is just such a question mark, or you don't really know what you're going to get there. Obviously, we saw them go to the AFC Championship game a couple years ago. I kind of liken that to the Miami Heat making it to the finals last year. Just kind of this team that was average most of the season, slightly above average, making a deep run into the playoffs. Just kind of like a weird thing. No really superstar players outside of Derrick Henry on that Titans team. Obviously, no like great superstar players on that Miami Heat team outside of Jimmy Butler, if you want to classify him as one of those. But then obviously you have the bottom of the division, and it's two teams who are a mess, and really two franchises who have been a mess for a long time. You look at the Houston Texans and everything they have going on down there. I mean, we still don't know what's going to go on with the Deshaun Watson case. Obviously, he still has those 22, I think, sexual lawsuits kind of against him, ranging from harassment to assault. And those are obviously going to have to be figured out before he steps on a field, I think, this fall for Houston. And you mentioned Jacksonville. Jacksonville's obviously a franchise who's been through the rough a lot lately. I think their hope is that Urban Meyer is able to really kind of bring some stability down in that organization. And I can't imagine a better quarterback coming out of college in the last 4 or 5 years to get that from than Trevor Lawrence. But you still have to kind of put more pieces around him, and they've got a lot of cap space that they've spent money on. Still a young roster with a rookie quarterback that I just don't think you're going to feel a lot of confidence in winning a lot of games. So I think it's a real two-horse race in this division, and I expect it to kind of come down to Indianapolis and Tennessee. And I think it honestly could come down to which team has better quarterback play, because both quarterbacks are presumably average. Obviously, Wentz was bad last year, but Tannehill's nothing to write home about. So I think it could very well come down to who has better quarterback play between Indy and Tennessee. I don't know about you, Vincent. What are you thinking over there?
Yeah, so I agree with you. I mean, I think it's a pretty interesting division. The quarterbacks are really a big question for 3 out of the 4 teams in the division. Tannehill obviously has been solid the past couple seasons, but the Titans have the best running back in football, Derrick Henry. I mean, he's an unstoppable force. But I think that the Jaguars are going to be surprised this season. Trevor Lawrence is coming straight out of Clemson. I mean, he got tons of experience, tons of playoff games, and he had a great coach. And I think that Dabo Swinney and Urban Meyer are similarly minded coaches. And I think Urban, coming out of college, is going to run his offense in a similar way. So I think Lawrence is going to surprise a lot of people. And I don't exactly know how Wentz is going to be. I think we see a lot of guys this year getting new starts, like Darnold and a few guys like that. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how he fits into that Colts offense. But I think also in Houston with Deshaun Watson issues, quarterbacks are going to be a big thing in this division. But I think this is really anyone's division. I think obviously the Titans are the front runner, but I do see the Jags winning some games, and I think it will be a interesting division come playoff time.
How many wins do you see the Jags getting over there, Vincent?
I mean, I think at worst they'll go for 6 wins, but I could see them getting up to 10, 11 wins, especially with the extra game.
Wow, you're really high on them. I mean,
I'm high on Lawrence.
Wow, Trevor Lawrence is worth 5 wins to you. They're going to go from 1 win to 6 at a minimum. I mean, wow, you're really high on him. I think he's going to be a very good NFL quarterback. I don't know if he's going to be as good as everyone has said he's going to be since his freshman year when obviously he won the national championship at Clemson. But I think he's going to be a MVP caliber quarterback at some time in his career. I just don't think that that's going to be this year. And I don't even know if he's going to be the rookie of the year this year. I think that's kind of a tough thing. I think you could maybe see a Kyle Pitts do that in Atlanta, obviously over there in the NFC. But yeah, I think it does kind of come down to how well Carson Wentz plays. If Carson Wentz plays really well, I could see the Colts winning this division simply because I don't trust Ryan Tannehill enough to really, get the Titans over the hump. Now, I don't know how much I trust Carson Wentz either, especially after how bad he was last year.
Exactly.
Well, while we're talking about the Jaguars and bringing in the rookie quarterback Trevor Lawrence, who most people have said is the best prospect coming out of college since Andrew Luck, obviously he's going to be partnered in the backfield with his college teammate Travis Etienne. Alec, how important do you think it is for him to be comfortable coming into that situation where team is not that great and expectations are high?
I think it'll be really interesting to see how much they use Etienne and how they package him inside of different offensive formations. I think I've read things throughout this summer since he's been drafted in Jacksonville. They've put him in wide receiver formations a lot. They've put him in the slot. They've put him out in the flat. And I think that is kind of where he transitions best into the NFL. He wasn't the best running back in college last year. I mean, that goes to Najee Harris, in my opinion. But I think that Etienne has a lot of ability to kind of change games in different ways. Obviously, he's a little bit bigger than a Darren Sproles, and he's probably a little bit faster than Darren Sproles. But he kind of reminds me a little bit more of Le'Veon Bell as a guy who was in his prime in Pittsburgh, was really good getting the handoff in certain situations, but was a real threat in the passing game as well. And obviously, we've seen Le'Veon fall off of that in the last couple of years since leaving Pittsburgh. But I think that Lawrence could really benefit off of just having that safety blanket to dump it off to in the flat after an audible or a check down.
Vincent, how about you? How do you think that Lawrence walks into this situation, deals with the expectations in a team that hasn't been great recently?
I mean, I think expectations are going to be obviously pretty high. I mean, he's the best quarterback we've seen coming out of college in quite some time. But I think Travis Etienne was drafted more as, just like Alex said, like a security blanket. I think he'll be in to block a lot. He's bigger than James Robinson, but James Robinson had a breakout season last year. I mean, he's going to do a lot for that team. He did a lot last year, and I think the Jaguars are going to live up to the expectations and maybe even exceed them.
And we would not be a good panel here if we did not talk about the biggest storyline in Jacksonville. Tim Tebow is playing tight end. Alec, how many catches is he going to have this season?
0. I love Tim Tebow. I loved the baseball experiment I wanted him to make to the major leagues, but he will not. He shouldn't make that roster coming out of training camp. And if he does, that's not just a ticket thing either. If the Jaguars really feel a need to go sell tickets after last season with COVID, you're bringing in a new head coach. You're bringing in Trevor Lawrence, like we said. Tim Tebow shouldn't be the person you're trying to get to sell tickets. So I don't think Tebow has any catches this year. Also, he's not a tight end size anymore. You look at how big other tight ends are in the NFL. He's not that tall, and he doesn't run that well compared to other tight ends. So Zero. I don't even know if he makes the roster.
Vincent, how about you? Are you as negative or are you more optimistic?
I'm a big Tebow guy, so I'd like to hope he gets a few catches. I mean, I think we'll see him within a few trick plays. Obviously, Urban Meyer does some stuff like that. He did some stuff like that in college, so I think we'll see him in a few packages, maybe make a couple throws. And I saw a few pictures of him, Alec. He's looking pretty big to me. I mean,
he's huge.
I think we'll see him block a little bit. I don't know about catches, but I'm hoping he succeeds.
If there's a situation to use him, it's in the red zone, just because, exactly. Like you kind of mentioned, he's so big. I mean, maybe you're able to hand it to him in an H-back kind of role, and he's able to kind of bulldoze his way into the end zone inside the 5-10 yard line or whatever. But I don't think he's necessarily going to be out in the flat running corner patterns for the Jaguars at all this season.
I could see him taking a few direct snaps too in the red zone, maybe trying to score a few touchdowns that way. But yeah.
Can we get the jump pass back? Or will we get the Tebow jump pass?
You took the words right out of my mouth, Alec. But let's go ahead and move on here. Up next, we've got the AFC West. Vincent, we'll start with you this time. Just give me your thoughts on the division as a whole, some of the teams that are set up to succeed, some of the teams that might struggle, and what you expect the storylines to be like this fall.
I think this division's pretty straightforward. I mean, last week I was talking, I think Patrick Mahomes is the best quarterback we'll see in our lifetime. I mean, I don't think there's any question that the Chiefs are going to win this division, but it's going to be interesting to see. There's a few quarterback battles. At Denver, we're going to see Teddy Bridgewater and Drew Lock. And then I'd like to see Herbert this year. I mean, he had a great season last year, and it's going to be interesting to see what kind of steps he makes. The Raiders with Carr, I mean, I don't think really anyone can contend with the Chiefs. They're the best team, in my opinion, in that division.
Yeah.
Alec, how about you?
Yeah, I'm right there with Vincent. I think that this division is Kansas City and a lot of average across the board. I think you look at Las Vegas, Derek Carr, he's average. I think if you had a really good offense or a really good defense around him, maybe you're able to make a little bit of a run, but they don't. I think Gruden, the experiment that they've tried out there is nice in theory, but it just hasn't worked so far. And I know that they got off to a pretty good start last year. They were able to beat Kansas City in Kansas City. Just one of Kansas City's 2 losses last year, actually. The other coming in the Super Bowl, of course, to the Bucs. But I don't think that Vegas has anything to really threaten Kansas City with. I think the Chargers are probably the biggest threat to them with a second-year quarterback in Herbert. Like you said, he was pretty good last year, 66% completion percentage, threw for over 4,300 yards and a mind-blowing 31 touchdowns to 10 interceptions in his rookie year. So he was obviously very impressive. And the Chargers lost 6 games, I think, by a touchdown or less last year. So maybe the Chargers are able to finally get over this hump of losing close games year after year after year. But if they're not, it's still going to be, a Chiefs division runaway. I mean, you look at Denver, you mentioned the quarterback battle there, Vincent. If Locke wins it, it's put up or shut up for him. I mean, if he's bad again this year, he's going to find himself as a backup quarterback for another team somewhere or potentially out of the NFL. And I think Teddy Bridgewater is a good story, especially with the injury he had to his leg and coming in for Drew Brees in New Orleans 2 years ago and going 4-0. But he wasn't that good last year in Carolina. And I know Carolina doesn't have a lot of weapons, and obviously McCaffrey was hurt, but I don't think Teddy Bridgewater is the answer long-term there. And you look at Denver, I think the question has got to start to move up to Elway. And how much longer does he get in that front office? I mean, since the Peyton Manning years in Denver, they have really underachieved largely, and they've been really disappointing.
Vincent, I've got a question for you here. Alec was talking about Justin Herbert. Obviously, he was the offensive rookie of the year, and he did already seem to be on the border of becoming a top 10 quarterback. Do you think he's going to enter that sophomore slump, or do you think he continues the same production or even improves next year?
No, I don't think he's going to enter a sophomore slump. I mean, he's got to have a lot of confidence coming off a year like that. I mean, there's not many expectations for them in that division. I mean, obviously with Patrick Mahomes, there's not going to be many guys who are going to be able to go out there and stop a guy like him. But I think he'll be able to live up to the continued expectations. I mean, we may see some regression in passing, but I mean, I don't think so. I think he's a solid quarterback, and I think, like you said, I think he'll break into that top 10 quarterback conversation in the entire NFL next season.
Well, we're slowly moving up the ladder here. That was the AFC West, and now we're moving across the country to the AFC East. One of the big stories in this division, obviously you have the New England Patriots retooling, spending a ton of money in free agency. We don't really see that from Bill Belichick teams. Alec, what are your thoughts on this division?
I think this division is really interesting, and I think a lot of people are kind of just giving the division title to Buffalo after going 13-3 last year and winning the division. I think you look at New England, and I think a lot of it obviously depends on what they get out of Cam Newton. Obviously, Cam was really bad last year. I mean, they went just 7-9. He played in, I think, 15 games, had 8 touchdowns to 10 interceptions, so he wasn't very good last year. Bill Belichick did say today, though, that he's way ahead of where he was last year. So if Cam's able to come back and just give you something offensively at the quarterback position, I think that they can maybe threaten Buffalo. Remember, New England had more players opt out than any other team in the NFL last year. So maybe the Patriots kind of retool things, get these guys back, and they're able to, really kind of get back to that Patriot way that we were so familiar with Brady. I think you look at Miami, they're really interesting. We know how talented that roster is, but there's a lot of questions at quarterback. Obviously going all in on Tua Tagovailoa this year. He threw 5 interceptions today, I think it was, at practice. First day of mandatory mini camp over there in Miami. Some came in 7-on-7, some in 11-11. But it was pouring rain, but still 5 interceptions is a lot in one practice. That's definitely not something you want to see from a young quarterback, especially when you're putting all your chips in that area on Tua. And he wasn't great last year. He wasn't as bad as people thought. But I think they're an interesting one to keep an eye on. But in the end of the day, I think he's going to come down to Buffalo. And I think Buffalo's probably going to be the team to win this division. Josh Allen finished second in the MVP voting last year. 37 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, threw for over 4,500 yards, was incredible. The defense is good enough. I mean, it's above average, close to average defense. And when you have a good quarterback that's an MVP caliber and he's on a rookie contract and you're able to pay other key players like Stephon Diggs, whose contract reworked in the last couple of weeks, you got a chance to potentially make a run at things in the playoffs.
Alex may be from the Midwest, but he's got his Miami insiders feeding him information from today's practice. Vincent, how about you? What do you think about the AFC North next fall?
Yeah, so I think I agree with Alec. I mean, the Bills are up there, obviously. Every other team is kind of in that rebuilding mode. I guess the Dolphins are starting to move past it. But I have no faith in Tua, to be honest with you. I mean, last year we saw him rely a lot on Fitzpatrick. Fitzpatrick bailed that team out of a few situations that Tua would not have been able to as a rookie. I mean, we may see him make progressions this season, but as Alex said, we saw him. He threw 5 interceptions today at camp. I mean, I just don't have much faith in him. I don't think he's going to work out as the Dolphins hope. But I do think that the Jets are going to contend with the Bills. I think they did a lot on offense. I think Wilson is NFL ready. He's got a huge arm. He can throw on the run, as we saw at his pro day. He made that amazing throw. And they have a decent receiving core, decent enough. I mean, they went out and they got Corey Davis. They have Jamison Crowder. And they also drafted Elijah Moore, who I think is one of the low-key picks for a guy who could be the best receiver out of that class. I mean, with amazing guys coming up, I think he could definitely fly under the radar as one of the top guys. I think they're missing a few pieces on defense, though. Marcus May had a great year last year. Quinnen Williams is yet to really break out. So I think on that end of the ball, they're missing a few pieces. And then in New England, I think Bill Belichick is just going to go through more frustration. I mean, ever since Brady's gone, I mean, it's been nothing but frustration in New England. I don't think Cam is going to be able to really get the job done in the way that they're hoping. I don't think he's got a good enough arm to make the passes that Belichick needs him to. But it's going to be interesting to see how that defense plays. I think they have a solid defense over New England. So
we're less than 20 minutes into the show, and Vincent's already getting love from the fans. Alec, my question for you is, we've got a couple of rookie quarterbacks in this division, Zach Wilson and Mac Jones, not projected to start, but he could later in the season. What are your thoughts on the two of them, and do you think Jones gets his shot?
I don't know if Jones ends up getting a shot. I can tell you, though, that I loved Zach Wilson coming out of school. I think Zach Wilson has a lot of, Patrick Mahomes, Aaron Rodgers to his game. He's got a lot of escapability from the pocket, quick release, good arm strength. Seems to have this just innate ability to make something out of nothing. Obviously, he didn't play against the greatest competition at BYU in the Mountain West. I believe that's where they play in. But he has a lot of talent. His arm talent is just incredible. And on Mac Jones's side, there's one thing that always seems to just kind of allow quarterbacks to stick in the NFL, and it's accuracy. And Mac Jones is one of the more accurate quarterbacks coming out of this draft class. He's got a lot of accuracy, and he was blessed to throw to incredible wide receivers in his 2 years at Alabama. Threw to, 4 or 5 of them wide receivers, had a first-round running back, first-round tackle as well, and a first-round center this most recent year. So he had a lot of talent around him, and obviously Nick Saban is great at coaching, and he's had an offensive coordinator in Sark, who's now the head coach at Texas. So he had a lot of tools around him. I think if he's able to just be accurate and not throw the ball to the other team, he's going to have a chance to potentially start at some point this year, especially if the Patriots find themselves around 500 come their bye week, or they're under 500 and they're struggling, and maybe they just want to try and do something. I think it'll be really interesting to see what kind of path the Patriots take with Mac Jones. And I agree with Vincent that Cam Newton's arm strength just isn't there anymore. After the shoulder injuries that he's had, he just doesn't seem to have the ability to throw it the full 53 yards horizontally across the field that we saw him do in his time at Carolina.
Yeah, this is an interesting situation because we were talking about Tua earlier. And, of course, he was another quarterback to come out of Alabama being regarded as deadly accurate. But since he's gotten to the NFL, his lack of strength and just comfort in the pocket has really started to affect him. We're wondering if Mac Jones will be a little more successful with it. Vincent, what do you think about Mac Jones and obviously your guy Zach Wilson that you were hyping up?
Yeah, so I'm pretty high on Mac Jones. I mean, I think he's got a great IQ. I mean, I shouldn't say that. I'm not too high on him, but I think he's got a great IQ. I think it's going to be interesting to see him make contested throws because we saw him throwing at Devontae Smith. I mean, wide open halfway down the field. He's got the arm to make the throws, but he's throwing a wide open player. He's got the best receiver in college football. He's got guys like Mechie, and he didn't have Waddle for the full season, but he had guys like that throughout his career. So, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see him make contested throws. But I think he's got a good enough IQ. I think he's going to be able to find the open guy. But like Alex said, I don't know if we get to see him make a start this season, but you never know if things go downhill with Cam. Belichick may want to get him that experience because he is the replacement for Cam, obviously.
So that's the AFC East, which means we only have one division left, and we all agree that this should be the best and most competitive division, the AFC North. Alec, I know you were especially hyped up to talk about this one. Why don't you let us know what you think of this division and what the final results in the standings will be?
Yeah, so I mean, last year you had 3 teams finish with at least an 11-5 or better record. You saw Cleveland go 11-5, you saw Baltimore go 11-5, and we saw Pittsburgh go 12-4. And obviously Pittsburgh, they got off to an 11-0 or 12-0 start and struggled down the stretch. Obviously, Big Ben's coming back. He's old. But I love Mike Tomlin. There's just something about Mike Tomlin in Pittsburgh. He's never had a season under 500. In fact, I think he's one of the more underrated, maybe overlooked coaches in the NFL. Obviously, you look at what Harbaugh's been able to do in Baltimore. He's done a great job there as well. And Lamar Jackson's just an electric factory at the quarterback position. And they have other skill set guys around him, Hollywood Brown at wide receiver. Of course, J.K. Dobbins probably needs to take a little bit of a step at running back this year for them, because you're going to see continually Mark Ingram get a little bit less touches in that offense. But I'm really high on Cleveland. I think that Cleveland has a chance to continue to take the steps necessary to kind of win this division next year. I think you're going to see Pittsburgh take a step back with Big Ben getting a little bit older. And I think you're going to continue to see teams effectively adapt to what Lamar Jackson is able to do well. And I think he may struggle just a little bit more than he did last season. So I think you're going to see Cleveland continue to take a step forward this year. They're going to get OBJ back healthy. But in my opinion, the signing of Jadeveon Clowney could potentially give them one of the better pass rushes in the NFL, with Myles Garrett coming off one edge and you got Clowney coming off the other edge. Now, I know Clowney's getting up there in age and he wasn't great last season, but if he's able to kind of find that inside of him, and teams are going to have to put so much emphasis on stopping Garrett, that maybe Clowney's able to get his sack numbers back up there, get his quarterback hurries back up there. And I think that I really like what Cleveland's been able to do. And I mean, you just have to see that the improvement that they made from the Freddie Kitchens era to the Stefanski era was incredible. And I think it continues again this year.
Vincent, we know that Jadeveon Clowney has been going downhill for the past 4 years, but we also know he has all of the talent in the world. What do you think about him joining the Browns and the division in general?
Yeah, so I'm going to have to admit here I'm a big Steelers fan. So I'll talk about my Steelers first. I mean, I think Big Ben is really getting overlooked. I mean, this is a guy who just before his arm injury led the league in passing. It was tough last season. He didn't have a running back really. I mean, I like James Conner, but the line didn't help much. I mean, there was no running game. The running game was non-existent in Pittsburgh, and they relied on the defense and Big Ben's arm to win them games, and which they were able to do throughout most of the season. But teams were able to start covering the quick passing game, something that was unique and just brought into Pittsburgh. I'm interested to see with the new offensive coordinator how things are going to work out, and obviously I'm really excited for Najee Harris. But I think the Steelers have a top 3 defense in all of football with T.J. Watt and Devin Bush is going to be coming back. So there's guys like that. But I think the 2 teams that will be jockeying for this division are the Steelers and the Browns. The Browns have made tremendous steps. I mean, Baker played well last year. And I 100% agree with Alex. Where we've seen regression from Lamar Jackson. We have a small sample size, just 2 full seasons. But he regressed in passing numbers and rushing numbers. So I think it's going to be interesting. We haven't seen a guy like Lamar Jackson who can do it on the ground and in the air in a while. I'd say since like a guy like Michael Vick, who's been able to do it successfully. But I think coaches are going to start to figure out how to stop it, and I think they've already started, which is why we saw the regression. So I think Lamar's going to have to make big steps in his pocket passing game if the Ravens want to continue to succeed. But I think Myles Garrett is obviously a force in that Browns defense, and then I think we're going to see big steps from Baker in that offense. So.
Alec, Alejandro Villanueva, James Conner, Bud Dupree, a couple of names to leave the Steelers this offseason. You still as high as them as Vincent is?
I think that they are probably going to have a chance to win the division come December. They always seem to, at least, right? I think the Najee Harris draft pick was one of the better ones in the first round in terms of team need. I think he's an upgrade over James Conner immediately at running back. And I know there's a lot of doubts around Najee's ability to kind of get out in the flat and catch passes and block a little bit as well. I don't really have those concerns around his game. I just think he wasn't asked to do them at Alabama because they had so many great pass catchers to go downfield that they didn't need to throw it to Najee Harris inside of 5-10 yards. Why would you do that when you can get 25, 30 yards throwing it to Jalen Waddle or Devontae Smith? I do think that the Steelers are going to have a chance. And I think that Najee Harris might have a little bit of will have a large impact on that, but I think it comes down to whether or not their defense is able to continue to perform at the level that it did the last couple of years. You look at where it was last year, they gave up 19.5 points a game. I think that was like 3rd in the NFL, and they gave up just over 300 yards a game, I think, total offense or total yards a game. And I think that was also top 5 in the NFL as well. So if their defense is able to continue to give them a chance on a weekly basis and they're able to hold their opponents under, 21, 24 points a game, they're going to have a chance. And if you give Big Ben a chance, I mean, a lot of people are always going to believe in him to get the Steelers down the field in winning time and potentially get them a touchdown or a game-winning field goal.
Vincent, any response to what Alec just said?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I think Najee Harris is getting a little overlooked. I mean, we've seen all Alabama running backs have such great success. I mean, it's not apparent when you look at these 2 guys, but they've drawn comparisons. I mean, Najee Harris, 6'2", 230. Derrick Henry, just 6'3", 247. That's what they're listed at. I mean, these guys, Harris has a little more speed, a little less trucking power. But, I mean, I think these guys are going to be fairly comparable when all is said and done. I think Harris is going to develop well in that Steelers system. I mean, if you look at the list of guys who've come through that organization, like Franco Harris, and I mean, Jerome Bettis, Le'Veon Bell, they've had lots of success at the running back position. But a team we didn't talk about is the Bengals, and I think that's going to be an interesting one. I would have liked to see them draft a offensive lineman in that spot, but I mean, get Burrow pass catchers. I mean, I understand the idea behind it, but I think it's going to be a fun, competitive division come the end of the year. And I think the addition of the extra game is going to be a big factor in seeing what teams make it out of the divisions in the AFC.
Yeah, I like how you mentioned Cincinnati there, Vincent. I kind of disagree with what you said there about drafting an offensive lineman in the first round. I think the pick of Jamar Chase was really smart. I think the drop off from Chase and the other wide receivers they were going to get in the second round, I think wasn't as big as it was from going to like Penei Sewell to Jackson Carmaine. Obviously, was who they took in the second round with the 46th pick out of Clemson. And I think that is kind of an interesting strategy to do. Obviously, they drafted Dante Smith, another tackle out of East Carolina, and that was in the 5th round or 4th round. So I think they did a good job drafting around Joe Burrow. Now, I kind of like the Bengals as a potential sleeper team if they weren't in the AFC North. I think that they're a team kind of like you with the Jaguars. You kind of think they could win a few games. If Burrow's able to stay healthy, stay upright, and he's able to kind of fully recover from his knee basically just being blown up last year, we're going to, I think, potentially see a Bengals team win the 5 or 6 games, which I think a lot of that comes from the fact that they have the extra game and they might be able to get to 6. But it'll be really interesting to see, in my opinion, what Cincinnati's able to do with Burrow, because he was really good last year when he was healthy.
Yeah, no, I like what go ahead,
Vincent.
I like what you said there with that pick. I mean, I'm not doubting the pick. I love Jamar Chase, but it's going to be interesting because we didn't see either guy play last season, Sewell or Chase. So it's going to be interesting to see what they're working on in their time off. I mean, we'll see if they're both NFL ready. Taking a season off is huge in football. I mean, we've seen a lot of guys not be able to recover from stuff like that. Obviously, it wasn't because of an injury or anything detrimental, but it's going to be pretty interesting to see these guys play in the NFL. So I'm excited.
Well, we already know the Chase and Burrow connection is pretty electric too. So it'll be interesting to see if that's picking up where it left off from LSU.
Alec, you mentioned the draft picks, but they also added Riley Reif to that offensive line. And of course, to the defense, we know teams in the AFC North are going to score, so you have to have a solid defense. They picked up Chidobe Awuzie and Trey Hendrickson. Do you guys, we'll start with Vincent here, do you guys think that those two can help elevate the defense, or do you think it's just going to be more of the same from the Bengals?
Yeah, see, I mean, when we're talking about defenses, when you think in this division, it's always been you're thinking of it's a pretty heavy defensive division. You're thinking of teams like the Steelers with the Steel Curtain. I mean, the Ravens always have an extremely solid defense. They've had guys like Ray Lewis. I mean, when I think of the Bengals, I just don't think of a defensive team really. I mean, they've had mean, dirty defenders in the past, like big guys who are ready to get in there and make hits. And the rivalries are a big thing in this division. It's always really everyone's going to play really hard, but I just don't see this defense being able to stop a lot of what are turning into dynamic offenses in the division. I mean, you like when you look around, you just see 4. I'll give 4. I'll say even the Bengals are turning into like top offenses in the entire NFL. The Steelers have a great receiving core, just drafted a young, solid running back. The Browns obviously have a bunch of pieces, Nick Chubb, Baker, Jarvis Landry, Odell. I mean, like all these offenses are crazy, and I don't see the Bengals really being able to contend in the division.
Yeah,
Alec, your thoughts?
Yeah, I pretty much echo everything that Vincent said. I just don't think there's enough wins on their schedule when you have to think about the fact that they're going to play the Steelers, Ravens, and Browns 6 times. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised to see them go potentially like 0-6 in those games. I mean, and that's obviously going against what I just said, and I don't know their schedule off the top of my head. I mean, maybe they get 1 or 2 of them at home if Pittsburgh, Cleveland, or Baltimore comes in, they're banged up a little bit, and they're able to get one in Cincinnati from any of those 3 opponents. But I don't think that they have enough just yet. And I think the Bengals are just in a tough spot, kind of like not as bad as the Lions in the NFC. Just they're in a division that's got 2 really good teams consistently, 2 really good franchises, and it's tough to build out of that.
I think they have the Washington football team on the schedule, so we already know that's an automatic loss there. Let's go ahead and zoom out here from the divisions and look at the conference as a whole. Alec, we'll start with you on this one. Vincent, you'll take the next one. Alec, who is going to be your most surprising team in the AFC for this season?
I'm going to go with the Chargers. I think I go back to them losing 6 games last year by less than a touchdown. I think with a new head coach, new regime over there, they're going to be able to get a couple of those wins. I trust Herbert to kind of take another step forward and get them a few more wins than we saw last year. they're in a bad division. I think you're going to see them potentially get 4 automatic wins against the Raiders and the Broncos, assuming Herbert takes that step. They have a good enough defense, and Herbert has good picks or good tools around him. Obviously, Keenan Allen, most notably at receiver, and don't forget they got Jared Cook as well, who's a pretty good pass catching tight end. So I'll go Los Angeles Chargers.
Vincent, how about you? Who is your most surprising team in the AFC?
I'm just going to continue off what I said before. I think the Jaguars are going to be my most surprising team.
I can't really trust Deshaun Jackson to stay healthy, but I know what you mean. I feel
yeah, I think it's going to be the Jaguars, but I think Trevor Lawrence is going to live up to expectations, and I think they have a lot of young receivers around him and 2 young running backs now, and I think that team is going to be hyped up to prove themselves, and I think adding Urban Meyer, offensive-minded coach, is going to be a good season for the Jaguars.
You know what? I hate to do this. I wish I could be original, but I'm going to go ahead and say that I think the Jaguars are also in for a very surprising season. I know expectations are somewhat high with Trevor Lawrence, but I don't think they're high for the team in general. Whereas I like Alec's pick of the Chargers. I do think they will be successful. But I think how they did last year, Alec mentioned that most of their losses were in close games. I do think that there is higher expectations for them than there is for the Jaguars. I think Najee Harris, I love what you guys said about him splitting the work with Robinson out of the backfield. I think he can fit in perfectly into the running game and the passing game. I think their defense is solid. They lost a couple of pieces. They brought a couple in, namely Griffin from the Seahawks at corner. But I think the Jaguars can get – we were playing 17 games this year. So I think the Jags can get – I'll say 10 wins. I think the Jags can get 10. And that would be an unbelievable success in my book. Vincent, I promised you would get to lead the next one, and this one's going to be a fun one. Who is your most disappointing team in the AFC?
I think my most disappointing team is going to be the Dolphins by far. I mean, this is a team that went 10-6 last season. It was a weird dynamic. I mean, obviously, Fitzpatrick and Tua kind of splitting time. I mean, the job was taken from Fitzpatrick after some success, and Tua kind of, in my opinion, ran the momentum into the ground. And I just don't think he's ready. In my opinion, I don't think he'll ever be ready. I mean, he could prove me wrong, but I just don't think at this time he's ready. And I don't think they have like anything special on either side of the ball. They have good players and they're going to have good pieces, but I don't think one side of the ball stands out enough to get them to 10 wins again. Maybe with the extra game, but I don't see this team finishing much better than 500.
Alec, do you agree with Vincent, or you got something else for us?
I do think the Dolphins could potentially be in for a little bit of a slide, but I think they have a good enough roster around Tua to kind of give them a couple of wins. I don't know if this is going to count as disappointing by any means, but I don't think the Titans are super good. I don't think the addition of Julio Jones is going to help them make a deep run in the playoffs by any means. Now, they might make it to the playoffs again, but I don't see them winning more than one game in the playoffs, and I think there's a lot of people who are penciling them in to just run away with the AFC South and make a run in the playoffs, win 1 or 2 games. I don't think Julio Jones does that for them because I don't think Ryan Tannehill is a good enough quarterback to help them in that area. And I think that their defense, just quite frankly, it's not very good across the board. It's not bad, but it's not good enough to overcome average quarterback play. And we know how important it is to have a quarterback that's either one, really good with a lot of tools around him, or two, an average quarterback with a really good defense to kind of cover up the lack of scoring that you're going to have. So I'm going to go with Tennessee.
So I went with the AFC South for my last pick, and I'm going to stick with them here. I'm taking the Indianapolis Colts, and it pains me to do this because I've been a fan of the Colts for a while, even back when they were with Jacoby Brissett. I should clarify. Fan is in, I think they have potential. As we found out during the last transition, I am indeed a Washington football team fan. But I think the Colts have been building something really special over there. Their offensive line, goodness, have you seen a better line in recent years? You think about the prime Dallas Cowboys, they're the Eagles during their run to the Super Bowl. I like their pieces at receiver, even though they're not big names. I'm not sure if T.Y. Hilton's contract is great value, but I do think he can still contribute. Defense has been solid. Darius Leonard is just an absolute machine. And I think the expectations for Indianapolis are not only that they're going to continue winning, but they could even take off. because people have said that Carson Wentz is the same Carson Wentz he was before, just without an offensive line. And the line is going to be much, much better. So I don't think he'll get sacked as much. He might not turn it over as much, but I don't think adding Wentz and getting rid of Rivers, I don't think it makes a huge difference. I think they might even lose more games this year. So that's going to be my pick. And now, of course, I'm anticipating this should be a fairly straightforward one. Alec, champs of the AFC. Let me guess.
Are you going to guess?
Kansas City, baby.
Yeah, I got Kansas City. I think if they're healthy, they're winning the Super Bowl, and I wouldn't be surprised to see them just kind of march there. Obviously, we've heard the Patrick Mahomes wants to go 20-0 or whatever it is, and that's the one record he has his sights set on. You look at what they did this offseason. It was pretty impressive. Offensive line was obviously their bugaboo. In the Super Bowl, we saw him add Orlando Brown in a trade from Baltimore. We saw him add Joe Thuney, Austin Blythe, and Kyle Long. He's coming out of retirement. They've got a good offensive line, and they're bringing a couple guys back that opted out because of COVID concerns. Lucas Niang, and they're not. Duvernay Tardif is also coming back. So their offensive line's got some depth. Nick Allegretti is another depth piece that we saw start games for them last season down the stretch. So they've got the tools, obviously, to surround Patrick Mahomes with Travis Kelce, in my opinion, the best tight end in the NFL. You've got Patrick Mahomes, who is the best player in the NFL. And then you obviously have Tyreek Hill on the outside and Tyrann Mathieu. Headlines a pretty good defense. So Kansas City's going to win the AFC.
Vincent, are you making it 2 for 2 here with the Chiefs?
Yeah, I can't say I disagree. And another offensive lineman they added is Creed Humphrey out of Oklahoma. They drafted him in the second round, and that was actually a lineman I was very high on. I think he did big things and pretty dynamic offense at Oklahoma. I mean, a lot of pass blocking experience, and that was their problem. That's obviously what led them to lose the Super Bowl. Mahomes was running around like crazy, had no time to throw the ball. It was kind of almost sad to watch because you couldn't get to see the dynamic plays he usually makes, even though he made a few crazy plays. But I think with all the additions they made on the offensive line, I think Kansas City's not going to have much of a struggle.
I don't know if I can word it as beautifully as Alec did with Bugaboo, but I'm going to make it 3 for 3 here. I'm going to take Kansas City to win the AFC, and I'm also sticking with Alec here. He won the 2.0 takes over me in the final. He must know what he's talking about. So I'm going to take Kansas City to win the Super Bowl as well. We were talking about it in pre-production if it'll be a matchup with the Buccaneers again or else someone else. But if you're given the choice of Kansas City versus the field, I feel like you have to take Kansas City at this point. They've made the Super Bowl 2 years in a row. They've won the AFC 2 years in a row. Last year they won the regular season title and the postseason title. They haven't really put a foot wrong, so it's hard to go against them. But, gentlemen, that is going to be it for today. Before we head out, do either of you have any final thoughts that you want to share with the rest of us?
I don't have anything. Thanks for watching. We appreciate it. Give me a follow on Twitter. My handle is right down there. Other side. There we go.
Yes, of course. Got to plug the handle. Vincent, any last thoughts before we head out of here?
Nope, I'm all set, guys. Thank you.
Well, that's going to do it. I've been Grant Mitchell. This is Alec Busse and Vincent Graziano. Make sure you subscribe to the 2.0 network, and we are out of here. Thank you for tuning in.